What we have here is a very good. I was trying not to make him too hard. Number 2, Socrates. The unexamined life is not worth living. See, Jimmy, you should have took that philosophy course. Richard Nixon. I am not a crook. Very good. Movie Casablanca. Here's looking. There we go. And of course, Forrest Gump. Stupid. Karl Marx, one of the Marx brothers, older brother of Groucho, I think, said, religion is the blank of the masses. The opiate of the masses. Very good. Rene Descartes. I think, therefore. And John Swaggart. Houston, we have. Very good. In fact, actually, no, historically, that's not what he said. What he said is, Houston, we have a problem here. Problems are like that. They pop up on us. They come unexpected. And it's not that no one could have predicted the problems, but we don't like to look for problems. In fact, we do everything we can to pretty much spend our time ignoring problems. Let's face it, nobody wants to be around people that just look for problems, right? You don't want to be at work and have someone come up to you and look at what you're working on and say, yeah, I don't think that's going to work. Or be at your house and you're working on it, maybe doing some construction, and some friend or relative shows up and watches you in the midst of it and says, yeah, that's a goner. We don't like people who look for problems because we don't like problems. And so whether they're problems in our finances or our relationships, problems at work, we do everything we can to kind of shut our minds off because we look at it from the mindset of, you know what, there are enough problems, I don't need to go looking for them. Of course, in that we find the problem. What are problems? Let me just give you a quick definition. If you can pop that up there. Got that? Yeah. A solution, a situation requiring a solution. Now, that's not overly deep, but it's the truth. It's a situation that requires a solution. It's something has happened, and now we have to respond to it. How do people usually respond to problems? Well, let me give you some example. Freeze. People just kind of get paralyzed and don't know what to do. Flee. People they run from their problems. They want nothing to do with them. Fight. People get angry. They get irritated. They walk around frustrated. Fake. And that's basically what I call faking normal. They just pretend that it's all under control. It'll all be taken care of. Have you ever met people who actually, they lie about their problems, or they lie about problems at work, and they say, oh yeah, we got that covered. We're good. I call this frame someone. In other words, blame the problem on someone else. People do it in their marriages. People do it in the workplace. My favorite, flip out. Just become hysterical about it and throw the towel in. And last, facing your problems. Now, which one's the correct one? Flipping out, right? No. The correct one is to face. What does it mean to face your problems? What does it mean to face them in light of who we are as believers in Christ? So I'm going to give you the takeaway this morning up front, because when it comes to problems, there are ways to solve them according to what the world would tell us, and there are ways to solve them according to what Scripture would tell us. And so the takeaway is simply this: every solution must contain submission to God. Every solution must contain submission to God. Now let me unpack that for you for a minute. Why is that? Why should every problem contain submission to God? Why should we stop and look to God? Because in every problem, there's an invitation for us to lean upon God. There's an invitation for us to wait upon God. There's an invitation for us to draw nearer to Him. Look at James chapter 1 with me, and we'll put that up there. James says this: "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds." Now, notice what he says: consider it pure joy. Yeah, that's what we do. That's the one I left out. Pure joy on how we respond. Because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking in anything. Every situation, every problem is an invitation from God. That's why every solution must begin with submission to God. We've got to stop and look and seek God in the midst of any problem that we face. Because within that problem, there is a solution. There is a solution from God, and the point of that solution is to draw us nearer to God. But not only that, every solution that doesn't contain submission to God just creates a bigger problem. We create bigger problems when we don't see God, because we seek answers that become just earthbound. We seek answers that just become diversions that keep us from really seeing the deeper problems. Number two, in that we end up with solutions that are not God's best. When we don't stop in the midst of our problems and really seek God, the answers that we come up with are going to be second-rate answers. Number three, if you don't see God in the midst of your problems, the solutions you come up with might be totally faulty in the way that you evaluate them. In other words, when we seek God, one of the great things that happens in that is God helps us to see whether the problem is really a problem. Whether the problem is really our problem, whether it's something we should worry about. How many of you go around putting your names on all sorts of problems that have nothing to do with you? Sure, yeah, absolutely. Parents do it all the time. Their kids can be 20, 30, 40, 50, and they're always trying to fix everything. People do it at work. They go around seeing something broken, and I'll take care of that. Putting their names on problems that don't belong to them. When we seek God, we get that opportunity to look and find out whether the problem is really a problem, whether it's really our problem. When we seek God, we get to hear from Him and determine whether it's a problem He wants us to address, not just a problem that other people want us to address. When you seek God, and this is important because people do it all the time, You don't have to worry about obsessing around a problem. I guarantee you, when you find yourself obsessing around a certain problem in your life, it's not because you're seeking God. It's not because you're looking for a solution that comes with submission to Him. We obsess because we're trying to fix it. We're trying to make something happen in our own flesh. Now, you can look at all this and you can say, that's fine, but some problems are obvious. You don't need to seek God. Or some problems are too complex and they come too fast and you got to do something. But the truth is, if you don't seek God for a solution, if you don't submit to Him in the midst of a solution, you just end up with bigger problems. This morning, I want to introduce you to a gentleman in the Scriptures who's a person we don't usually think of in this way, but he's a person who had a lot of problems. He's a person who God put in the midst of a lot of problems. His name was Jeremiah, the prophet. Now, some of you remember back last year we looked at a series we called Majoring in the Minors. We looked at the minor prophets. Jeremiah wasn't in that list because Jeremiah is in the list that composes the major prophets. Jeremiah, Isaiah, Daniel, Ezekiel. He covers a long span of the history of Israel. And God used Jeremiah for one purpose, to go and to speak to the people of warning and of condemnation for their sin. Now, I just want to share with you, we're going to just jump through some scriptures real quickly of Jeremiah's life. But I want you to see, this is a guy, from the very beginning, it all started with problems. So let's look at Jeremiah chapter 1. We read this. Alas, sovereign Lord, I said, I do not know how to speak. I am too young. What's the problem? God comes to him and he chooses to use Jeremiah, and Jeremiah says, look, I'm not ready for the job. I'm not mature enough for the job. I'm not old enough for the job. People are not going to listen to me. And not only that, I don't speak well. And what does God say to him? But the Lord said to me, do not say I am too young. You must go to everyone I send you. Then the Lord reached out his hand and touched my mouth and said to me, I have put my words in your mouth. Well, you would think that's the solution. He had a problem, didn't think he could speak well, didn't think people were going to listen or pay attention. God touched his mouth, put his words upon his lips, and everything went right from there. No, it didn't. Because look at the next scripture that we see. Jeremiah chapter 7. When you tell them all this, they will not listen to you. When you call to them, they will not answer. What a situation to be put in. You're called from God, and you're already from the beginning, you don't speak, you don't do well in public, but God makes it possible. And then just when you get enough confidence to say, okay, God, you put your word on my lips, I'm ready, he says to you, oh, by the way, the people you're going to, the people that you're going to speak to, they're not going to listen to a word you have to say. You're not going to have any positive impact on those people. Talk about a problem. Talk about a dilemma to be put in. Okay, so you've called me and I feel privileged, though not ready, and you've gifted me, but now you're telling me it's all going to end poorly. And in fact, it does end poorly. Look what we read in Lamentations 3. Lamentations is a little tract that Jeremiah wrote. You see it in your Bibles right after the book of Jeremiah. He says, they tried to end my life in a pit and threw stones at me. Okay, not only can I do this, but you made it possible, but then you told me I'm going to have no impact. And you're right, when I did, they threw me in a pit and started throwing stones at me. Now, I don't know about you, but I'd be thinking to myself, Houston, we have a problem here. There's something I don't know how to deal with this. I mean, what am I supposed to do with this? In fact, Jeremiah chapter 20, we read this. I am ridiculed all day long. Everyone mocks me. Everyone. My friends, my family, my enemies, everyone hears me, listens to me, and they mock me. Whenever I speak, I cry out proclaiming violence and destruction. I tell them, God has got it in for you guys. Because you live rebellious lives, because you are given to idolatry and adultery, God is going to deal with you. He is going to send the Babylonians, and they are going to deal with you. And so wherever I speak, what do I speak? Do I speak words of love and comfort? No, I speak words of destruction and violence. So the word of the Lord has brought me insult and reproach all day long. But if I say I will not mention the word or speak any more in his name, his word is in my heart like a fire. What a position to be put in. Everybody mocks me. And deep down inside, I say, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. Except God touched my lips. God put his word upon my mouth. He put it in my heart. And I am compelled to speak. Is that a problem? Is that a dilemma? Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever been in a situation where you're trying to do the best you can, you believe you're doing the best you can, you're trying to love God and serve God, and you can't do anything but that, and yet nothing's working. Everything's falling apart. You feel like you're slipping backwards. And you seem to have no help from God and no love or care from anyone else. You think you got problems? Jeremiah was a guy with big problems. Jeremiah chapter 37. Jeremiah was put in a vaulted cell in a dungeon where he remained a long time. So how do you speak to people when you're thrown in a dungeon? I mean, don't you feel forsaken? Isn't this the time to flee your problems? Isn't this the time to compromise? He doesn't give in. Chapter 38. They lowered Jeremiah by ropes into the cistern. It had no water in it, only mud, and Jeremiah sank into the mud. So, what causes someone to just keep submitting to God in the midst of their problems? In the midst of even the problems that seem like they're God's problems, not ours. Jeremiah chapter 29. God says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. See, here's the deal. No matter how overwhelming your problems seem, no matter how unpopular you seem, no matter how much it just seems to make sense to just fall in line with everyone else, you've got to submit to God. You've got to put yourself in that place and know that no matter what happens, I know my God. I know his plans for me. I know that he is the God who gives liberally to all who ask of him. And I know that while I'm in the midst of it now, God has prepared a future, another day, in which all of this will be in the rearview mirror. See, we're in this series called Monitoring Your Approach. How do you monitor your approach to problems? You understand that your problems are God's problems. And God's problems are your problems. And you stick close. And you understand that if you don't submit to God in the midst of your problems, you just have bigger problems. If you try to come up with other solutions, you're going to have a bigger problem because you're going to move further away from God. And the more you keep creating your solutions, the further away you get from relying on God, and everything falls apart. If we're going to monitor our approach to the problems of our lives, we've got to first look and ask ourselves, are we fully submitted to God? I want to share a little clip with you. This is from Francis Chan, and he talks about this. Now, he's just been asked a question about homosexuality and how do you deal with that in San Francisco. And what I want you to hear isn't so much about homosexuality, but I want you to hear what he has to say about submission. Can you put that on?
Like I said, the sin issues are so much more glaring. But you know, the way I approach that is the same way I approach a couple that's ready to divorce. One of the issues that the homosexual community and those who struggle with it, the reason why a lot of them have a problem with the church is we treat it as a sin that's so much worse than the others. And we'll excommunicate people for homosexuality, but we won't do it for divorce. And I do it for divorce. It's a terrible sin in the sight of God. When you're cheating on your wife, or you're going to leave her for some ungodly reason, an unbiblical reason, man, we pursue it, we fight against it. But it's kind of like what I said about singleness. This isn't really about sexuality as much as it is about surrender to the kingdom and being a person who's about the kingdom that says, look, if I'm single the rest of my life, that's not the biggest thing in my life. It's not my sexuality or my desires, my sexual urges that define who I am. I find my identity in, are you kidding me? Like, I speak to God? Are you kidding me? Like I can actually be his servant and I can do what he calls me to do, and I'm going to be with him forever. Like, where's that identity found in? It's no different from be careful how I word this stuff, but I guess to me, a lot of these sin issues are secondary. The bottom line is, let's just start here. What I say to people, whatever issue you're dealing with today, is, are you willing to surrender to God no matter what he says? What if he said in this book, Chinese people have to stand on their heads. I mean, that's just an example. Like, I'll try to stand on my head. I mean, I'll just, he's God. What if he said, Chinese people don't get to marry? He's God. I don't like that, but I'm going to surrender to that because I understand the difference between a creator and a created being. Like, so whatever. And before we even get to what does this book actually say, I have to say, do you just surrender? Would you surrender? I mean, if you disagree with God on an issue, would you still submit to him? I really believe that's the core issue here.
Whatever the issue is, whether it's homosexuality or whether it's adultery, whether it's your financial problems, will you put yourself in that position and understand that there's no solution unless that solution contains submission to God? So I've got to ask myself, even if I think, well, this is not a big deal. Well, it is a big deal if I'm not asking myself, what would God have me to do here? What does that mean in a practical sense? Number one, pray. I had a gentleman call me a couple weeks ago and was having some family difficulties, and so he just asked me to pray. And I saw him a couple weeks later, and I said, so what happened? What was going on in that situation? And he said, I don't remember. I thought, he goes, yeah, I don't really remember. I just remember contacting a bunch of people I knew and asking them to pray. And God just helped me to work it out. Where does submission come from? It begins with prayer. Prayer is one of the great gifts that God has given us. It is one of the great privileges that God has given us to go and to ask God, what would you have me to do? To read over the scriptures and to seek solutions, but to bring them to God and say, God, is this your will? Submission as part of a solution begins by prayer. Number two, be quick to listen and slow to act. I see people who, I prayed about it and then I went and did it. Well, I question whether they really prayed about it. Because prayer takes time and the willingness to just listen. To ask yourself the questions, God, is this my problem? Am I just putting my name on it? Or am I allowing people to put my name on it? God, if I do act, how would you have me to act? Number three, trust that still, small voice. We all know it, don't we? Where we have a problem and we think, oh God, what should I do? And we hear God say to us what we should. And we say, no, that isn't it. No, the answer is really over here. Even though we know the answer really isn't over there, it's just a diversion. It's a distraction. It's a way to buy more time so the problem becomes bigger. And then we have to listen to the loud voices around us. Listen to that still small voice. When you hear God saying, don't do that. That has nothing to do with me. And you're a follower, and followers follow, and That's not following. Number 4, ask what will be the impact and to who. Everything you do has impact. I share with people all the time, there are no scraps. What you do has impact. And the impact is going to be to you, and it's going to be to other people. God created us, whether we like it or not, as a community. You know, I had heard someone this week say to me what I've heard a million times through 30 years of ministry. Well, you know, I just thank God it's Jesus and me. It's not Jesus and you. Yeah, it's Jesus and you and everyone else. Jesus doesn't like you that much. I'm kidding. But that's what I hear. I hear this kind of arrogance. Just Jesus and me. I know that's the way he feels about it too. No, he doesn't feel that way about it. He came to die for everyone. He wants us to get along with everyone. And we've got to ask the question, how will this impact everyone around me? Will this just be a selfish solution to my problems? Or will this be a solution that also becomes an opportunity to bring a solution to someone else's problems in their lives? Number 5, ask godly counsel. Yeah, you listen to God, and that comes first. And just to make sure you haven't missed it, or that still small voice you didn't kind of squelch, go to people who you know who are godly, who are going to look at you, and you know they're going to tell you the truth. I've sat with people and have shared things with me that went wrong, and I've said to them, why didn't you tell me? And they've said, because I knew what you were going to say. That's not submission. Submission is, yeah, if we know the truth, we confirm it. And we follow it. Number 6, act with confidence and trust God. Confidence should almost be in front of every word we use. As believers, we need to be confident. As people who are seeking solutions through submission to God, that when he's given us direction, we take it and we go forward and we act with confidence. Well, what if we're wrong? What if maybe we've missed it? What if maybe other people have missed it? Well, the wonderful thing about us being wrong is God is still good. Romans 8:28, right? For God works all things to the good of those who love him and called according to his purposes. And so even when we're wrong and we're seeking to do right, God will turn us around. He'll redirect us. And not only will he redirect us, but because knowing our hearts, he'll make even the wrong direction the right one in the midst of it all. That's just the God we worship. See, to have problems and not present them to God is just a bigger problem. So when you monitor your approach to the problems that come your way, yeah, you understand, I can't freeze, I can't fake it, I can't flee, I can't flip out on people. I have to face those problems, but I don't face them alone. And I make sure that with every solution to every problem, there is submission to God. I just want to close with some words from John F. Kennedy that I love. They came right when he was accepting the nomination for the Democratic Party. He said this: "We stand today on the edge of a new frontier, but the new frontier of which I speak is not a set of promises. It is a set of challenges. It sums up not what I intend to offer the American people, but what I intend to ask of them." That's great stuff. And that's what our country was built on. It was built on people who came to this land who saw that they were facing all sorts of problems. They were people who were oppressed, who wanted to be free, and they understood that to go to a new frontier, it meant not the promise that everything was going to work out, but the promise that they could work it out with God. The promise that nothing good happens without challenges. Why does God bring problems into your lives? So that he can fulfill his promises. His promises to bring perseverance, to bring growth, and to bring maturity. To bring you closer to him. To move you away from the world. For you to know and see and experience that the plans he has for us are not to harm us, but they are plans to prosper us and give us hope. Please join me in prayer.